Okay, good morning everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My guess is a lot of you, it's probably the afternoon or evening, so thanks very much for joining us and taking some time out of your day. This will probably take around 45 minutes and then we'll have a little Q&A session perhaps at the end. So a brief introduction. My name's Guy Singleton. I am an integrator in the UK just south of London. I've been building big theatres for a number of years, and a few years ago, perhaps about 4.5 years ago, we decided that we wanted something a little bit quicker, a better way to do things. On our desktop and laptops, we have little Excel spreadsheets or little widgets that allowed us for projector throw ratios or screen calculations or the log equation for amplification power requirements and just little things like that. And so we decided that perhaps what I really wanted to do was to be able to quote for projects super quick, super efficiently, but accurately and based on standards. So for a number of years I've been working behind the scenes with CEDIA, doing some white papers and some standards development and lots of other little things. And as part of that, I was also involved in judging, so global and the the Asian and North American awards as well. So, I realised that actually having a look at other people's documentation that there are obviously the big boys out there who are generating documentation and they're doing a really great job at it. And then there are other people that are on site all day and they're working really hard and they're trying to, do some CAD drawings or whatever it is they're doing. And time was really, really pressing. And that's the same for me in my business. So we built TCD about 4 years ago. And in August of this year, it was acquired by CEDIA. So now I'm working for CEDIA. TCD is based on standards, and the standards that TCD is based on was really generated by CEDIA and the Consumer Electronics Association, the old CEA that is now the CTA. And these standards are called CEB 22 and CEB 23. So if you don't have a copy of these, I mean, they are a little bit out of date. They don't have immersive audio, or there is no reference to HDR or a higher resolutions or any of those kind of things. But essentially, the engineering principles for these documents is the same. It's just a scalable document. TCD isn't subjective. It's not my opinion on things. It's actually based on these two standards, as well as the ITU documents, Dolby's document, DTS's document, other codec development documents, primarily things like Oro as well. So all of those standards documents have all come together to allow us to produce TCD, and in essence, we found it really, really successful, to do jobs this way. TCD has a number of brands in the tool at the moment. I'm sure that if your brand isn't in the tool, it won't be long before it is. Before CEDIA had acquired it, we had about 65 brands or 60 brands, and each one of those had a number of SKUs. So we had, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 SKUs within TCD. Now CEDIA have it. Obviously, it's becoming a lot more of an attractive proposition to some of the slightly smaller and more obscure brands. And we can see this probably doubling in the next 12 months. And then ultimately we have a goal of around sort of 400 potential manufacturers that, that we are working with or have approached us. So, we hope that will be a really good thing. Pricing, if you're a CEDIA member, and my assumption is that the vast majority of you on this call are, you get the first tier of this for free. So this is media room. So this will do your 5.1 subsat systems with a flat panel display. So this will allow you to do a little 5.1, 7.1, flat panel display up to about 65 inch. And that is a free member benefit from CEDIA. So, the cost of subscription for that alone is probably worth your membership fee, I would guess. The vast majority of people's day-to-day design and documentation requirements are probably in that media room category. Sure, every now and again we get big theatres, high render channel count theatres, but for the most part, I would assume that a flat panel display, a number of sort of in-room loudspeakers. The next tier is also subsidised heavily by CEDIA. Is called Media Room Pro. Now this will give you a 5.1 subsat, 7.1, and a drop-down screen, so it'll allow you to have a flat panel display and a drop-down screen and a front projection system. So think of this as kind of like a multifunctional gaming space where you might have an OLED display and then a drop-down screen and a projector that perhaps is on a lift or on a pole or something like that. And this will also do kind of DSP-based immersive audio. So that's probably about 7.1.4. That's probably where the DSP limit is currently. Cinema room is fixed seating, front projection, aspect ratio, something called a Sabine equation or Sabine equation, which is the RT60 value. So this is how the room behaves acoustically. So these are the absorption diffusion coefficients of various fabrics and finishes of the room. And Cinema Room Pro is really that high render channel count. So there's a special piece of mathematics in there that will aid you in designing rooms with the correct speaker layouts and let the room kind of decide. So instead of walking into the room and saying this is a 5.1.2 or a 7.1.4, you'll set the seating out, you'll set all of those other things out, and then the room will dictate how many loudspeaker channels you're going to have within that. So if you're in doubt of which tier and which category you feel that you should be in, there is a little tick list here that shows you where it is and things that are coming soon and things that we're working on and stuff like that. So, and obviously if you choose Cinema Room Pro, you have access to all those other tiers as well. And really, we don't think it's, what is it, $500 US. We sell our designs in our business. And I think if you was to sell one design in yours, you'd probably recoup that money. As well. So I'll jump straight into a design. You can choose which tier there is. There is going to be a new tier coming soon, which was going to be for the big modular micro LED flat panel displays, for instance, from Samsung, called the Wall. So there will be another 4th tier coming soon. And there are some other little things that perhaps I'll give you a sneak peek into. But just for now, we'll name our project. You can call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to choose my room dims. Obviously, I work in millimeters. If you're US based or something like that, you potentially would use inches. So just check the correct box there. Some of the big tech problems we have is if people put 300 in there, and obviously they get a shoebox size room and then their speakers are outside the room and other problems. So just it is in millimeters. We're going to proceed to the codec. So here we could say legacy codecs 5.1 7.1. Here we could say Atmos. So we're going to choose here 7.1.4 or 5.1.2 or something like this. We could choose DTSX and choose one of their predetermined loudspeaker layouts. We're working, as part of a sort of tech committee really for CEDIA, which is called a Home Cinema Recommended Design Practice, a HCRP. And that will be, an amalgamation, almost a compromise of all of those different configurations. So Oro, DTSX, and Dolby Atmos, and it will be a kind of compromise for those as far as wiring and cabling for those. I'm going to choose this one here, which is the high render channel count. This is it. You're basically saying let the room decide. So this could be, a Trinov, an Accurus, potentially a Datasat, or one of those processors that potentially has the ability to render greater than 11 channels. But obviously, if you're getting into the, the super high end stuff, the 32, 36, potentially, the sky's the limit. So I'm just going to let the room decide. Once I choose that, I can move on to the RT60 time. So this is how the room is going to behave. This is whether it's going to be fairly reverberant or there's a lot of absorption and how that is. So I'm going to select some plasterboard, perhaps on the front wall. I'm going to try and build a baffle wall, and then I'm going to add some more materials here. I'm going to choose some absorption. And then in this top corner here, you can see the RT60 value is at 2.957. So if I was to reduce the amount of absorption, you can see that is changing all the time. So I'm going to, rapidly build through some of this. You kind of get the idea. You're really looking, it is slightly subjective. If you hover over these little eyes, I've given you a little bit of an idea of what we think would be quite nice. So 0.4, 0.5 is a fairly acceptable RT60 value. And these manufacturers like RPG, GRG, Art Novian, I think we're talking with Acoustics and other members of that kind of group of manufacturers. They're providing us with their absorption, diffusion and reflection coefficient data, of which we're doing all the calculations for you in the background. So I'll just rattle through this. I think you kind of get the idea. I'll just put some of this in. Okay, so and then finally some carpet, and then I'll add some seating. And here you can see I have an RT60 value of about 0.34. So I can, you could go in there and you could tweak the amount of absorption or the amount of diffusion or the amount of other materials until you can, and then you'll work out how many meters squared you need to order for certain amounts of this. And then when you're happy with all that, and I'm not particularly, but you kind of get the idea, you can just keep adding materials, and maybe you've got a glass window in the corner, or you've got, some brickwork on a fireplace or something like that. You can just keep adding those materials and tweaking the percentages or the meter squared of those if you know what they are. And then when you're happy, you can click confirm. And now we're into the aspect ratio. So, what you're going to interview your client. You're going to say, do you watch movies or music or sport? So I'm going to say, if I took you to the cinema, I would probably sit 2/3 of the way back, and CEV22 will suggest a screen width in relationship to that aspect ratio to say, look, if you like sitting there, if I only sit halfway back, I perhaps want a screen of this size, and if I like sitting nearer the back, then perhaps I'd like a screen of this size. But I'm going to choose the selected screen, the suggested screen, sorry, and then I'm going to choose the kind of the material of that screen. Now, I'm not too worried about the border or the velour makeup of that, or whether it's got Lutron Savoia motors or silent gliss motors, or whether it's got an IP module or any. I'm not too worried about any of those things. All I really care about, is it a true Lambertian reflector screen? What does the fabric offer in the way of gain? What's the off-axis viewing of that screen? What attenuation does that screen offer to perhaps the higher frequencies? All of those things. That's pretty much all I worry about as an engineer. So I'm going to choose a fabric. I've got a gain of 160 degrees here, so I'm kind of starting to build a bit of a picture. I'm going to choose a projector for this. Perhaps I'm going to choose a boulder, a Barco boulder. And now I get to choose the lens of this. So if I was to choose one of these lenses, an EN68, it's going to tell me that it's a prime lens. It's a fixed focal range, and my projector has to go there. If I do this one, it's going to tell me it's got to go there, and you can see the projector moving around in the drawing, and it needs to stay within this green cross-hatched area. So if I choose 63, and I can keep going to 61, this is pretty much where I want to use it. Now, would I like the projector fixed to the ceiling? You can see the projector moving, fixed on a pole, in a ceiling lifter, built it into a bulkhead or a coffer, or put it through the wall into a projection housing or a different room at the back. And that's pretty much what I'd like to do. This is a big unit, it's fairly noisy. I want to keep the noise floor in the room quite low. So I'm going to put that through the room. You can just see the lens there. So I know I'm sort of pretty good. Now we get to select some of the seating. So I'm going to choose some scenic seating. I'm going to choose some of these recliners. I perhaps would and I can mess around with the amount of seating and in which area. If the seats that I really would like aren't in there, then you can just go into these fields and you can add those custom. So you could say this is the width of the arm, this is the seat back depth, the seat width. And if I'd like to bring those seats closer to each other, I can, or push them further away from each other. If I'd like to move the gap between the seats wider, you know, you can really play around with this real time. Here, I would quite like a little step here, so I can click this extend button. That brings that out. If I'd like to change the plinth riser height, I can do that so that my viewable, you know, my viewing angles to the screen are better. And once I'm sort of happy with all of that, I can click custom here, and then I can move the seating backwards and forwards until I'm sort of fairly happy. This is dynamically driven, so this angle that you see here, you can see that's at 50 degrees, 51, 52. As I push that back a little bit, you can see that these are the angles that are calculated, and this is probably where I'm aiming for. This is kind of reference. And this will give you a really good idea of making sure your viewable angles are correct and your seating is in the correct positions. This is, yeah, it looks fairly complicated. It's actually fairly simple. So this piece of mathematics down here talks about the number of surrounds is equal to 2 plus the length of the listening area. So I'll talk you through that briefly. So this is the length of the listening area. This is the width of the listening area. This is the distance to the side wall, and this is the distance to the back wall. So every time I change one of these fields or one of these parameters, it moves and changes everything down here. And then when I click calculate, if I click this calculate the button, I click calculate, and it will fire off the polar array of where all of those loudspeakers need to be placed. So this is a correct placement. So it does all the trigonometry, and it'll even run a polar Cartesian converter. So if these are polar coordinates, it would convert those to a Cartesian coordinate using a sine cosine converter. And as I add potentially more rows, you can see here that it's going to calculate these to be 21. And as I reduce those again, you can see it's going to tell me that I actually need 15. So rather than just saying this is a 7.1.4, this is actually 15 discretely rendered loudspeakers. You can kind of play around with this a lot until you get what you believe is the best kind of look and feel to everything, you know. So you can also change the MLP. So if you wanted to change the main listening position from the front row to the back row, you can do that and then calculate. And then you can see that the loudspeakers change slightly. So if your client says, actually, I don't want to sit in the front row, I'd like to sit in seat 4, you change the main listening position, recalculate, and the loudspeakers will change in accordance with that. So, you know, to do this kind of thing freehand, you know, is fairly complex and fairly complicated. So, you know, to do this is quite helpful, we found. This is all of the coordinates on 3 axes, an X, Y, and a Z axis, to the exact acoustical insertion point for each of the loudspeakers. So in 3D space, this is exactly where they should be mounted. Once we're happy with that, you know, not particularly, but one other thing, this brings this bisector angle, and it just brings it in to a median angle. So you can see this front wide left. It should be here where this dotted line is, and it just pulls it back in there, and that, you know, fills this gap in a little bit as well. So we have got a little bisector to median angle converter as well, just which we found helpful as well. So I can, once I'm happy, I can move on. Okay, so large commercial theatres, this is, you know, multiple staggered sides up, multiple tiers of seating. Timbre matching. If you check this button, it will only allow you to choose loudspeakers from the same manufacturer, potentially from the same range, and with the same sort of mid-range, same voice core, you know, stuff that's kind of tonally the same with a similar coloration. This box here, if you check this box here, show all speakers regardless of position. You know, if you've got a JBL Everest or a Proceller P815 or something that's, you know, 1.5 meters high, you know, a Bowers & Wilkins Nautilus, for instance, and you wanted to invert that as an Atmos channel and invert that on the ceiling, it perhaps wouldn't be recommended, but if you check that box, it will allow you to put any speaker anywhere. You know, as I reiterate again, I have seen some crazy stuff, so if you do check that, there is things called collision avoidance, which means lots of loudspeakers seem to want to occupy the same space, so you can end up with a few problems. I'm going to choose some loudspeakers, so let me choose perhaps some JBLs. I'll choose some in-walls, and then perhaps some pause. It's bringing in the sensitivity of these, the efficiency of the loudspeaker. So then I can choose some JBLs, some in-walls, 3s. So they're the surrounds, and then I'll do JBLs, in-walls, and 2s. So you can see that the amount of loudspeakers that you have here to choose from. We think we've got pretty much, you know, some of the main big players, and there are obviously lots of loudspeakers that are still coming through. So try to give you a little bit of advice on sub-placements. Obviously, LFE and sub-placements and the behaviour of low frequencies in small spaces is a topic that perhaps you could talk about for days, if not weeks. So, you know, these are just kind of guidelines, really. So Floyd Toole and the really smart people that were on the R10 Council at the time that designed CD22 decided that there were probably 4 main sub-placements, 2 on the side walls, 2 on the front, 1 on the front, 1 on the back. This is the mid-position point, and here are some subs in the corners, which will give you that bit of boundary gain that perhaps you need to hit 115 dB, which is reference for subs in those kind of rooms. So I'm going to choose this configuration here. I'm going to choose a sub and something like this. So when I'm happy with that. Because of the way that I've kind of built the room and configured it, it's saying to me you need to have this processor, and you can't have an 8-channel one, you need to have at least a 16-channel one. If I check this box here, show all processors and models regardless, you could use this to design the room, and then perhaps you use a DSP-based processor of your choice. You're not going to get discretely rendered object-based audio through multiple channels if your processor isn't capable of rendering those objects. So I'm going to choose a 16-channel, and then I'm going to choose a trim of some amplifiers. And here it's telling me that you've got 8 channels, but you need 19. So as I add more, it's saying, okay, you've got 3 of these amps, you've got enough. Eventually over here, we are going to work on a little table that talks about biamp, triamping, quadramping those, which will give you a little idea of channel counts and stuff like that to make sure that you're good. Required SPL and headroom. So if I need to hit 105 dB at the listening position, and I've got an amplifier with this efficiency, and it's a direct radiating loudspeaker with -6 dB per doubling of distance, I know that I'm going to achieve X dB at the listening position unless I have a more efficient loudspeaker, potentially sit closer, and then I need to make sure that my amplifier is capable of delivering the power to that loudspeaker. So here I could say, look, I'd like 1 dB of headroom, and I'd only like this to hit 95 dB. And I've given you a little idea of what we would consider, you know, fairly good. I mean, to achieve 105 dB with 6 dB headroom in a really large room would be, you know, fairly challenging. So, you know, I'll let you kind of deal with some of that. And then once you're happy, that's pretty much the design done for the technical aspect of things. And then I'll click calculate. It will run off to the TCD server, and here it will start calculating and building the model in CAD. So we decided to build things in DXF files because, you know, they're very, very flexible files. You can save those files and import them into Visio, sorry. So if you wanted to use DTools or another software to add layers on and light fittings and electrical socket outlets and stuff like that, you can do that. But DXF is infinitely flexible. I've worked in CAD for the whole of my career, and we just decided on that as a format, really. Briefly, I'm working, or will be working soon, with some people. So David Meyer, Tony Gramani. There are some other people in CEDIA. There will be an option at some point, I think, to select what the loudspeakers are, and then there'll be a performance fact, which will be data that's engineering based and engineering biased. So we hope that will be coming in soon. This is a quick amplification requirement, so it tells me exactly what I need as far as amplification. This is my loudspeaker requirement. If you don't have CAD, you can download a free CAD viewer here, or you can look at it online. You could go onto Autodesk and download a free CAD viewer. I'm going to proceed to renders. So here I'm just trying to build an idea of what the room will look like. So I could say I'd like, starlights and a coffer. I'd like the paint finish to be dark. I'd like, some blue panels. I'd like some different kind of coloured carpets. I'd like the seats to be red. I don't particularly, but I'm just trying to give you some idea. I could change the screen grab on this, so I could change this to perhaps a sports car, or a hot air balloon or something like that. And then I get to choose where I'd like to sit to take the photograph. So I might sit in seat 3. So if I click this button, and then I'm going to say, yeah, I'd like to take the photograph from seat 3. So I'm going to get a couple of renders. And then when I'm happy with these sort of pre-visuals, I'm going to click happy and then move on to my hub. So this is all the projects I've ever run through TCD. And you can see here are some Meridian audio and perhaps some Genelec stuff. So if you're using active stuff, it does present that data in a slightly different way. It knows what the SPL is at 1 meter and will present you a calculated SPL at the listening position. So this will probably take a few minutes to render off. So I'll show you the design below. So if I export the design below, I'll bring that in from the other thing. You can see that, I've got all of my loudspeakers laid out, and because it's a 3D view, I get lots of elevations. So I would probably file save as front elevation, file save as side elevation, side elevation, and then you can start sort of building, layered drawings up. It's very difficult to work in 3D space. If I was to pick this speaker up and move it, perhaps it's slightly more challenging to work with. I also get 4 elevations. This back green line and this front green line are the primary and secondary lens multipliers for the projector. So the projector can't go any closer than the front green line and any further away than the back one. So that works pretty well. So this is the front green one, this is the rear green one. Now, you can also add some drawing attributes here and print to PDF fairly quickly. So there are 9 drawings, obviously 4 isometrics, a top plan, and 4 elevations. So you could literally, leave model space, go into paper space, and then print to PDF quite quickly. We also use CAD Autodesk on an iPad Pro, which is a very low subscription, maybe sort of 20 or 30 pounds, and it allows you to build these and show clients, and obviously pinch and zoom and turn the room and stuff like that on an iPad, which we find quite nice. There are some placeholder visuals, so I just chucked in some placeholder visuals. They're not actually the room as you would know it, but if you can't wait for sort of the 3 or 4 minutes, you can see that it will render those visuals off fairly quickly. Just while we're waiting for those to render off, I'll show you, if you want a bill of materials or something like you work in details, this will give you a full bill of materials ready to import as a CSV into details. So the minute you import this, it will allow you to create your not only your bill of materials, but perhaps any of your first fix, your second fix, any of your complexity factors, your local area pricing, and taxes and all of those kind of things. We decided not to get into pricing because of it's a global tool, and it was just so difficult for us to work out, dealer pricing and margin and things like that. So we just give you this, import it into D-Tools or one of your project management tools, and then you can do your pricing from there. You can print off calibration reports. So here's the calibration report you just saw me do. So, I use CalMan when I'm calibrating, but, if you just want to, do IRE, grayscale tracking, brightness, color, contrast, tint, overscan, those kind of things, those sort of front panel, calibrations, you can just fill this in and send this to the client. We've also done the same for audio calibration. So you can print this off, and obviously if you subscribe, you have your logo on these documents. And here you can work out the sensitivity, the SPL at 1 meter, the calculated SPL, and then the measured SPL, and then you fill this in, have your engineer, any client's comments, and you can leave this with them as a calibration report. If you've got an issue, you can email an issue to us. You can click this and say, my speakers did this, or I've got no idea why it didn't quite work the way I needed it to. You can archive a job, so if the job you've got, perhaps wasn't one of your best ones, you can archive that. You can edit the design. So if you've got a design, we didn't want people to use one design and then re-edit it 1,000 times. So the limitations with editing a design is there's 3 goes at the design. You can't change the name of the project, and you can't change the dimensions of the room. There are certain things within that are fairly fixed. But you can, go in and say, look, I'd like to swap the screen out for something else, or, instead of using bronze speakers, I'd like to up those to silver speakers so that they give me slightly more performance and those kind of things. So, and then let me just run through here. So, when you print this out, we've got a 40-page PDF that you'll print out. It will talk about CB22 and CB23 and performance objectives, and why we design cinemas in a certain way and what the engineering principles are behind that. So we'll talk about the room design considerations. It will take off quickly screen grabs from the CAD. So if you don't have access to CAD fairly quickly, it will take those off. It will render the room off in a kind of colorless way that will give you an idea of how the space is effectively going to look without, any of the busy colors or any of those kind of things. The seating layout and how the seating is. Obviously, this is one I did the other day. This talks about audio, so dynamic range, focus, clarity, envelopment, mean spatial variance, seat-to-seat uniformity, dialogue and speech intelligibility, all of those kind of things. And really, this is a great document to say to your clients, look, we're not just designing it and putting in what we think is the most expensive product. We've designed something that's going to deliver at a performance objective. So it will go off to the database and pull in all the loudspeakers and all the documents and the DIMMs and the weight and all of those things that you need to know. Amplification here, you can see this is the processing, the user interfaces for the processing, the I/O schedule, so how many SPDIFs, how many opticals, how many rack you, all of those kind of things that as an engineer you need to know. This is the modal response to the room, so the first, second and third length modes, where you're going to experience good bass, obviously the axial, tangential and the bleep modes as well, maybe slightly less important, the first 3 length modes. The video, so we're talking about dynamic range, color accuracy, color gamut and resolution. In our opinion, or certainly in my opinion, that's the hierarchy that video really needs to be considered. Video requirements, so what the screen is, where the projector needs to go, what the off-axis viewing of the screen is. This is a sample of the screen. This is the attenuation that the screen offers to the higher frequencies over 10 kilohertz. Here you can see that we've got a 0.75 dB roll-off in the high frequencies for loudspeakers that are located behind the screen. I know that using this projector on that screen size, I'm going to hit 62 foot Lamberts or 214 candelas per meter squared, which is a pre-calibrated figure. This I used on this occasion, a Sim2. Here I've got, we've talked briefly about how the room will be designed and built. So we talked briefly about target curves, impulse responses, and the Sabine equation, so the RT60, the reverberation time of the room. We do the reverberation over 6 octaves. So this is 125 hertz, 250, 500, a kilohertz, 2 kilohertz, and 4 kilohertz. And here you can see that I've got an RT60 of 0.383. I can tell you how much materials I need to buy and order. You can see the materials that I put in on this occasion, which were from certain manufacturers, so we're bringing all the data from those. Now we've got the seating data, and then I don't know if you remember, you get to choose which chair you'd like the photograph taken from, and then you get an idea of what the room will look like. So this is a 40-page PDF that's ready within a few moments. Okay, so the one that we've just done is now completed, so that's how long it took. Okay, so this is the AM demo you've just seen me do. This is 39 pages. It's pretty much the same. You can see that I've used the JBLs on this occasion. This is the room, the speaker layouts, everything that I've just shown you in the way of trigonometry, the JBLs, the Trinov, IO schedules. Here I've used the low key, so I've got 58 foot Lamberts here, 200 candelas per meter squared. And then a few materials, and this room should look slightly different. So you can see here that I've taken a picture from the screen that I did. And then once you're happy with that, so you get the CAD, the PDF. If you would like to bring that into your company documentation and edit that slightly and change some things around, you can export that to Word. So that PDF that you've just seen me bring in, it would export that to Word, and you can cut and paste that and make that look like your own company kind of look and feel. That's pretty much the design. You can see that I get to go in and change things and revisions and things like that. We are working, we think that perhaps by ISE, there'll be another little button here that you can click on that will allow you to download, we're going to call it an immersive visual. And when you download that to your tablet, you'll be able to look around the room, and it'll also work on Google Glass. So you could email that image to your clients and just say, what do you think? Do you like it? They could download that to their own tablet, look around the room. Yeah, I like this, I like that. Can we change this? Can we change that? And you can run some revisions and stuff like that. So it will work as you've seen there, and it will also work on Google Glass. We do have a developmental roadmap at the moment. We're looking, baffle wall will not be too far away. So the introduction of baffle wall, there are lots of things we're working on over the coming years, which we've thought long and hard about what we consider to be important. Obviously, everybody has their own ideas of what would be good, but we've got a fairly fixed roadmap for certainly the next 12 months. So in essence, that's TCD. You would then run a revision of that. You'd do a revision to perhaps using different speakers, or you might value engineer some things out if the costs were too high. And you'd get to a point where your client signed up on a project. You could sell the documentation, sell the design. We certainly do. It's not something we would give away. And it will allow you to, hopefully be super efficient. You've got 9 CAD drawings, you've got, 40-page PDF drawings, you've done all the mathematics, calibration reports, both video and audio, as well as renders. If anybody's spent any time in things like Google SketchUp or 3ds Max, hopefully you'll know that it is a time black hole, to get involved in those kind of things. So that's pretty much where we are at the moment. If anybody's got any questions, I guess you could probably type them into the box. Otherwise, we're pretty much there. I mean, it can do, I did some sort of value engineering ideas of how to, time and motion studies. And I think we were incredibly generous by saying it's about 63 hours work. I mean, if you've got a CAD guy on your organisation or your company, that's one thing. If you've got somebody that can do 3D visualization, that's something else. Then you've obviously got all the mathematics and the technical design and documentation, the development of all of that documentation as well. You know, so we said probably 63 hours, but that is for a team of at least sort of 2 or 3 different people, different skill sets of people. So the hope is that if you are a fairly small, modest company, it will give you some, you know, really good skills at your disposal. And equally, you know, once you've honed the client in and you've nailed that design, you can sell the design to the client as part of your package. So I think that's it. I'm not sure if there are any questions. I'm not sure who's on the call. No. Well, must have done a great job. Great. All right. Well, in that case, I think, you know, I said it would be about 45 minutes, and I think that's with a little Q&A session. But, you know, CEDIA acquiring this is really their, you know, I think one of the most fantastic member benefits. So, you know, if you don't use it and you are a CEDIA member, you can log in, use your CEDIA credentials, the same that you would perhaps use for the community. Although there is a slight login problem, I think that will be sorted today. I've spoken to a member of CEDIA staff this morning, and they think it might be ready today. Great software and presentation. Oh, great! Thank you so much. So you know, for CEDIA, if you are a CEDIA member, as I say, you do have access to the free media room version. It is limited. You don't get the renders. You know, you don't get, you know, some of the greater mathematical parts of it, because, you know, designing a media room is exponentially simpler than designing a, you know, a higher render channel count front projection cinema. But, you know, it will still hopefully make you really efficient in your work. And obviously as well, CEDIA have vastly subsidised the rest of it. So if you are a CEDIA member, that is a massive benefit. And also, you know, this is just a tool. This isn't meant to, you know, phase anybody out of their work life, really. So the idea is that CEDIA offers some great training, some great cinema design training, so you can understand what those numbers are, what they mean. You can understand what a good design is. Because ultimately, if I gave 10 cinema designers a cinema, they would all probably come back with something completely different. So to work on performance objectives and to work using peer-reviewed standards is definitely the way to go. So all that leaves me to say is to thank everybody for joining me. Thank you so much. I know it's 45 minutes and everybody's got homes to go to and busy days. So thank you so much. And I think that's it. If there are no questions, that's it. So if you are a CEDIA member, log on and enjoy. Thanks a lot. Bye.